Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And mainly today we're going to be focused on the report of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. Since the previous week, since the previous Saturday, they have changed a little bit the way they provide the report. If you remember the previous months, the previous years, and since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians provided us numbers every single day. And just the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation Shoigu every single month, in the beginning of every single month, provide his own numbers about the situation, about the loss and so on. But starting the previous week, the Russians started summarize the total losses of the Ukrainians for another week of clashes all over the combat lines. And first we're going to start with Kherson, and according to the Minister of Defense, as a result of clashes in this direction, on Kherson direction, the Ukrainians lost around 355 soldiers, 33 armored vehicles and 12 artillery systems. As you can see, the level of losses is very heavy, and the most important that Ukrainians continue losing armored vehicles. Not just armored vehicles, mainly the Ukrainians were using light vehicles that they were using to supply, to support, to make some rotations, to bring more forces to the combat line and so on. And as you can see, just for 1 week of clashes on Kherson direction, the Ukrainian lost up to 1 battalion. The losses are very heavy. And the main reason of all those losses during the previous week was that the Ukrainians were trying to cross Dnipro, were trying to create some foothold on the Russian bank of the Dnipro River. They was trying to capture the positions in the vicinity of Kazachie Lager and so on. And this is one pipeline of Ukrainian losses. So let's assume that during the previous week, the Ukrainians were trying and made few attempts to capture this foothold. At some positions, they were more successful. At some positions in some directions, they were less successful. Anyway, they were trying and currently are trying to implement this operation. Another pipeline of the Ukrainian losses was the air bombings with the FAB 500 and FAB 250 all over the combat line, all over the bank of the river from Lvov to Kazatske. So another week and another battalion the Ukrainians lost in this direction. When talking about Zaporizhzhia area, we got a lot of updates during the previous week, but there is one important thing that they need to mention. First of all, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes from the 2nd of September till the 9th of September, the Ukrainians lost just 845 soldiers, and in comparison with the previous week, the level of losses has been reduced. And the main reason of that is that a week ago the Ukrainians probably finished their mission, finished their attempts, and finished the Battle of Robotina. They managed to capture the settlement, they managed to dig in deeper in this direction, and after that they slowed down. And not like they took a decision not to continue any offensive operation. The reason of the level of losses, that level is very low in comparison with the June and July, is that the Ukrainians turned their focus in direction of Verbova. And during the previous week, the Ukrainians made a lot of attempts to get as close as possible to the settlement, to dig in deeper, to send a small squads of 5-10 soldiers, to send some armored vehicles and so on. And as a result of those attacks, we saw that the Ukrainians managed to get very close to the settlement, not just to the Verbova. The Ukrainians managed to get very close to the south in direction of Очеретовate and Novoprokopovka, and we got another geolocated confirmation that as a result of redeployments of movements with the commandos, reconnaissance squad, the Ukrainians managed to even at some points to bypass Novoprokopovka from the east. You see that this is geolocated video. On this video we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian infantry who were heading to the south, further to Очеретовate, trying to develop the roads and trying to prepare the safe road for the next wave of armored fist attack. As a result of these clashes, one more time, the Ukrainians lost 845 soldiers. So up to 2 battalions the Ukrainians lost just during the battle of 1 week. Significant losses, 2 battalions, it's too much. And We are not talking about Kherson direction, because when talking about Kherson direction, we see that the main forces that were involved in those operations were 124th Defense Brigade, so Territory Defense Brigade, 122nd, and the most active was 126th Brigade. But when talking about Zaporizhzhia, we see that the main losses the Ukrainians had among the strategical reserves, the forces that were trained in the Western countries, like 82nd Air Assault Brigade, like forces of 46th Air Mobile Brigade, and of course of 47th Mechanized Brigade. These brigades have Bradleys, Strikers, Challengers, and so on, so very powerful ones and significant losses. But this is not the most important number about the losses among the manpower. During the previous week, the most important updates, the most important things was the battle of between artilleries, between the Russians and the Ukrainian artilleries. The Russians reported that Ukrainians during the previous week involved around 360 artillery systems, and more than around 160 artillery systems were the Western productions. And during the clashes and artillery duels, the Ukrainians lost 63 guns, and this is around if we split, it's like 6 part of the in total number of artillery guns that were involved. So the Ukrainians basically during the previous week lost the artillery duels because they lost lots of machines, lots of and mainly of the Western production. Now we are moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, the South Donetsk direction. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 1,230 soldiers and 61 armored vehicles. So as you can see, the level of losses on this direction is very heavy. And the main reason of that is that Ukrainians were trying to concentrate their forces in Urozhaine, in Blagodatne, in among the fields, on the north in Prichistovka and Zolotaya Niva. They wanted to concentrate the critical mass before the next waves of attacks in direction of Novodonetsk, Novomayorsk, Staromlynovka. The Russians, if you remember, during the week were bombing and shelling these territories heavily with artillery guns, with flamethrower systems and so on, and this is the reason of such heavy losses. Furthermore, if we will translate the number of losses, the Ukrainians during just 1 week lost up to 3 battalions. And one more time, this is not just the 3 battalions from Kherson like Territory Defense Brigade. These are one of the most powerful brigades that Ukrainians have. We are talking about 38th Marine Brigade, 37th Marine Brigade, 35th Marine Brigade, 31st Mechanized Brigade, and so on. Significant losses, but during the week the Ukrainians managed to achieve some progress in the vicinity of Novomayorsk, and currently this is the most let's say active front line from the Ukrainian side and from the Russians as well. We got more and more details and confirmations that Ukrainians as a result of attack managed to capture the northwestern part of the settlement, to dig in deeper, to send some reserves, reinforcements. I'm not saying that the Russians were defeated, and this is a very important note that you need to understand. The Russians weren't defeated in this direction because basically the northwestern part of the settlement was reduced till ruins a long time ago, not today, even maybe before that attack. And the Russians just took a decision to step back towards more reliable positions, and after that the Russians started bombing and shelling the Ukrainians' reserves, the Ukrainians' reinforcement, the Ukrainian forces who were heading in this direction, because the Ukrainians understand that they need not just to attack, they need to dig in deeper and to prepare the foothold before the next waves of attack, or at least until the Ukrainians are able to capture and to continue clashes for Novodonetsk. And for all these things, the Ukrainians lost 2 battalions just for a week. And we understand that the main purpose of the Ukrainians is currently to capture these 3 settlements, like Novodonetsk, Novomayorsk, and Kremenchuk. When talking about Donetsk and the area on the south of Donetsk, on this direction we see completely different picture, because this is the area where the Russians have some progress, where the Russians are advancing, where the Russians are continuous storming of Novomikhailivka and Konstantinovka. And today we got another video how the Russians discovered command center of Ukrainian forces, and as a result of artillery strike they destroyed. But the most important updates are coming from Krasnogorovka, and today, for the first time since the storming process of the settlement, we start receiving the videos how the Russians using tanks started bombing and attacking the high-rise building on the edge of the settlement, which means that the Russians started the active phase of the storming of the settlement with tanks. And this is a very important update. And during the week, when talking about Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 2,100 soldiers, so it's probably up to one brigade. But when talking about this direction, we understand that the initiative in this area is under complete Russian control, and the main purpose of the Russians is to capture the bridgehead and the foothold in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka to complete the battle for Nivelskaya, that located on the north of Krasnogorovka, and to capture three settlements like Pobeda, Konstantinovka and Novomikhailivka on the south Donetsk direction. And if the Russians are able to take these three settlements, this is going to be not just the collapse of the Ukrainian flank, this is going to be the collapse of entire Ukrainian army in this direction, and the Russians will be able basically to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and maybe even to create few, not just one, but few, 3, 2, 4, 5 cauldrons of Ukrainian forces in this direction, while the Ukrainians are trying to capture just 3 villages with significant losses. The Russians are trying to improve their positions in the vicinity of Donetsk direction. The Russians also continue attacking the Ukrainian forces in Pervomaiska. One more time, just for 1 week, the Russians repelled 56 attacks where the Ukrainians lost 2,100 soldiers, 68 armored vehicles and 30 artillery systems. Of course, the level of losses is very heavy, but not so heavy when talking about artillery systems in comparison with Zaporizhzhia area, where the Ukrainians lost just for 1 week 63 artillery systems. And we understand where exactly the Ukrainians took a decision to concentrate their manpower, their artillery manpower. And of course, the number of losses in 2,100 soldiers mainly connected with the situation in the vicinity of Bakhmut, because during the previous week the Ukrainians made lots of attempts to attack in direction of Andreevka and Klishchevka, and as a result of those attacks the Ukrainians managed to establish and to develop their positions along the railways. Currently the Ukrainians try to storm the settlement by the name of Andreevka, but this settlement is under Russian control, and yet the Ukrainians haven't managed to improve their progress in this direction, and they had significant losses in this direction, significant losses in Klishchevka. And also reminded that during the previous week we got a video how the Ukrainian soldiers were captured in this area and was moved, those prisoners of war, on the mainland and the territory of Russian Federation. But probably the most important thing is that the Russians found the key region, found the key area they need to establish control over to complete the battle for Klishchevka and Andreevka in their favor. And we're talking about the area between Chasov Yar and Ivanovska, the two, and the settlement by the name of Canal. 3 settlements that a key region, central settlements that Ukrainians used to redeploy their forces from the north to the south, from the south to the east, from the east to the north, and so on. And the Russians, there are like a lot of brigades, a lot of forces, Sudoplatov, artillery forces, Akhmat special forces. They attack and publish almost every single videos, 3, 4, 5 videos, how they attack, destroy another and another Ukrainian armored vehicle, and so on. The level of losses is very heavy in the settlement. The Ukrainians currently haven't managed to improve their positions, to fix some artillery issues, and they launched, and during the previous week they will continue launching more and more attacks where they have significant losses. When talking about Kupiansk and Lyman front lines, that week was another week of Russian, let's say, invisible offensive operation in direction of Sinkovka and Kupiansk direction. We haven't received any updates about any like geolocations informations about like positions on the ground and so on, just text messages on the Telegram channels and so on. But no, anyway, as a result of clashes on these two front lines, the Ukrainians lost around 875 soldiers. So 2 battalions were destroyed as a result of clashes on this direction, and more than 54 armored vehicles. Also another week of very significant losses from the Ukrainian side without almost nothing, no progress on the ground. So, and we understand that the main purpose of the Russians in this area is to get as close as possible to Kupiansk and to capture the settlements like Sinkovka and Petropavlovka. And this will allow the Russians to cut the main supply roads that go Kislevka, Kotlarovka, Berestovaya. When talking about Lyman front line, this front line is stabilized, just regular artillery duels and the clashes in Kremenaya forest. And this is the situation, so we'll see what the next week is going to bring us. But according to information we have on the situation on the ground, I'm not sure that the next week is going to be, when talking about the Ukrainians, bad in comparison with this one. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.